Okay. Welcome back to Salam Media, and yes, it brings us now to 43 minutes after 7 p.m. Welcome back. Now, obviously, we just had a great interview with Abdullah Wadia out in Nelspruit with DLS Safaris talking about going wild. Now, furthermore to the Go Wild segment today, the focus is obviously rhino poaching. Now, there's a new initiative. There's a new initiative, and it's an anti-poaching project called the Rhisotope Project. This was launched to obviously utilize nuclear technology to protect the African rhino. Now, over the last couple of years, we've seen a surge in the number of rhino poachings, and we've seen government and many other companies, civil society, come to the forefront to support the butchering of these beautiful animals and species. Now, this project here is going to utilize nuclear technology, and to talk to us a bit more, we are going to speak to African Rhino Project Head and Director of Radiation and Health Physics Unit at Wits University, Professor James Larkin, who's going to talk to us a bit more in this regard. Okay, we're just waiting to get Professor James on. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening and welcome. Sorry, I've got hi.
Hi there. Yes, welcome. Welcome to Salam Media. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Great to have you with us. Professor, now, as I was mentioning in the intro, over the last number of years, we've seen a surge in the number of rhino poaching and, the mass killings of the beautiful beings, just for whatever purposes it may be, the illicit trade of the ivory, etc. Right. Something very striking here is a nuclear initiative. Now, many a times there's a connotation when it comes to nuclear, the scandals, it's harmful, this, that. But here's something that you're going to utilize to save rhinos. I mean, let's look at the method in the madness here. I'm really enticed by this Rhisotope project, rather.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on. Look, what we're going to put small quantities of radioactive material into the horn. Now, okay, that might sound a little bit strange to start off with, but what it will do, well, it's got two purposes, in fact, as you alluded to. One, it will hopefully dissuade the end user from wanting to own rhino horn, because people's natural aversion to sort of radioactive material.
Correct.
So that's one reason why we're doing it. But second reason is, so if we put the radioactive material in the horn, then if that horn is taken by a poacher, it then becomes that much more detectable, because internationally, at airports, at ports, harbours, border crossings, things like that, there's something like 10,000, maybe 11,000 portal monitors that have been set up to detect radioactive material. This was set up many years ago to prevent terrorists acquiring radioactive and nuclear material. And so what we are doing is using that army of experts, if you like, those guys who've been employed to protect our borders, to monitor the borders. We're going to be using that army of people to help prevent the illicit movement of poached rhino horn.
Now, very interesting you mentioned and put into perspective, very plain, simple, and easy to grasp. So this is going to be put into the horn of the animal, and obviously for detection purposes, it will be much more easily detectable. And I'm sure all of our borders, obviously, be it inland and the coastal borders, are going to be having this. Now, countries like, who significantly have lower demand for rhino horn, places like Vietnam, perhaps, we talk about countries with higher demand. Now, this is obviously created awareness campaigns and lobbying campaigns, many stickers on the cars, etc., and civil society, civil groups coming to the fore. Now, from a perspective in terms of the Nuclear Energy Corporation of South Africa, right? And I'd like to bring in the Colorado State University, because the Americans as well in this regard, right? Together with global scientists and researchers. Obviously, South Africa, we own one of the best rhino veterinary surgeons, right? Who I think his practice is Dr. Willem Fowles. Now, the purpose of this, Professor, just take us through a bit more deeper in terms of that, from a global context, in terms of the wealth of experience coming together.
Sure. We kind of came up with this idea a couple of years ago, and I suppose about a year, well, just when COVID kicked in, to be honest, I was doing a lot of other work, international work in nuclear security education, and traveling, once a month to go elsewhere in the world to go and do this as sort of training and education. So that all came to a halt. So I was sort of sat at home for a while, and it sort of minds turned to thinking about this project. And because I've done so much international work in nuclear security and radiation protection, I've got an extensive network of friends and colleagues globally. And so I started writing emails to various different friends and colleagues, including people at Colorado State. And this sparked something in their imagination, asking them to use skills that they've developed over the years, skills and knowledge they've developed over the years, but to use it in a completely different way. So rather than working at nuclear power stations or, working with sort of humans in medical physics and things like that, this was asking them, would it be possible to sort of put a bit of quantity of radioactive material into a rhino horn and make it detectable? Had discussions, and the sort of, having dropped this pebble in the pond, the ripples spread out all around the US and many other parts of the world. Had discussions with people at the CDC in Atlanta and various other parts of the world as well. And it was sort of we all kind of thought, well, yes, it would be possible to do this. And so from there, kind of refined the idea and started looking at, what might be the appropriate sort of isotopes, and started sort of developing that whole idea. Obviously, one of the things in the background in our mind is, first, do no harm. So whatever we put into the rhino must not harm it. So that's where we need to do this sort of initial experimental work, where we will be doing some computer modeling, sort of then making up models of rhino heads and using that to sort of test some things like that.
Now, Professor James, you mentioned, testing purposes and, has something like this ever been done before? I mean, apart from obviously using nuclear technology and science coming together.
Yeah, not really. There have been attempts to use other techniques to devalue rhino horn in terms of sort of maybe putting a poison in it, putting a dye in it, but not to actually use something like a radioisotope to devalue it. The beauty, if you like, and where we perhaps differ from those efforts to put poisons or dye in, is it's a sort of two-pronged attack. One, it makes the horn, devalues the horn in the eye of the end user, but it also introduces along the entire supply chain from poacher to end user a number of other different points where it might be possible to sort of intercept the rhino horn. And what you've got to remember is quite often those smugglers who are moving, say, rhino horn, won't just be moving some rhino horn, they'll probably be moving other illicit goods as well. So if you can sort of use the radiation to highlight it, say a suitcase that's carrying illicit goods, rhino horn, then they might find other illicit items in there as well, and then will lead to the arrest of the individuals concerned, with hopefully a prosecution to follow thereafter. So it's sort of a multifaceted approach.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it opens up a whole new dynamic in terms of securitization and detection at ports of entry, etc. Things like that. Now, I want to talk about the first phase of this project, because you were talking about the isotopes, right? And I want to talk about non-radioactive isotopes, because maybe some viewers, listeners are, watching, streaming in. We acknowledge all of you guys. Thanks for the love. And, I'm wondering, okay, what exactly are they on about, So just to break it down, I mean, the carbon, the nitrogen, how it's all injected in, just to break it down.
Yes, I can break it down. What we're doing basically is, at the moment, we're using what we call stable isotopes. You can think of them as a sort of marker or a tracker molecule or tracker atom that we can put into the horn, because what we've done is we've taken a compound called proline, which is an amino acid. It's a building block of keratin, which makes up the horn. And we've put that into the horn, and it's got these tracking atoms in there, if you like, which will allow us then to see if there's movement from the horn of the animal into the body, because that's one of the most important things that we need to understand at this point in the process, is to see, you know, if whatever we put into the horn has to stay in the horn. Otherwise, you know, it might get into the body, and that's not what we want to happen. It's part of a process to demonstrate to people who own rhinos, to manage stakeholders and the sort of the welfare of rhinos, that whatever we put into the horn of the rhino is going to be safe.
Yeah, obviously, because I mean they've been lobbying all of these years for this rare animals, and have to follow the due diligence. Now, the third phase and the second phase, obviously, you mentioned, is the scientific commission. They include the project participants, and I look at something about a 3D printer and, you know, simulating the rose atom plan. Talk to us about that.
Yes, because that's going to be quite a fun and exciting part of it. We've CT scanned a rhino head. We've got hold of a CT scan of a rhino head from the US. And what we're going to use that to do is build, using a 3D printer in blocks, we will create an entire rhino's head, full-scale rhino's head, made out of something like Perspex or something like that, which will have very similar shielding properties to animal flesh. So we can then put radioactive material into the horn of this model, and then we can put detectors in various parts of the other part of the head to measure what will be the doses that those parts of the head will receive from the radioactive material in the horn, and that will allow us then to control and limit the quantity of radioactive material that needs to be put into the horn. It's going to be a project. We'll work with the engineering department of Wits University, and they're quite excited about, getting out the 3D printer and making these things up and then putting it together.
Yeah, so and obviously making South Africa proud, making Johannesburg proud. I mean, the university's got heritage, so that's what it's all about.
It's gripped the imagination of almost everybody I've spoken to about this project. It was that, you can see sort of a light bulb going off in their head and saying, no, this is something that's really interesting, and we will support you and, help you on your way. And,
do you feel that the people you've approached so far are willing to go beyond borders now?
Yeah, I think so. That's always has been our intention, is once we've sorted out the science and we've developed a provable technique that we can show to the owners will work, we will then take it global. Anyone who wants to learn how to use it, wants to learn how to use the process, whether it's in India, East Africa, wherever they have rhino populations that are at risk, we are very happy to teach these people, help them all free of charge, because in the end, this is not something you want to make money out of. This is something that you want to be able to share.
It's for the greater good.
For the greater good, because they're terrifically iconic, these animals.
Professor, when it comes to costs for doing this, I mean, obviously each animal we know obviously is costly in terms of their maintenance and their health and livelihoods, etc. When it comes to this particular part and this initiative, what are we looking at in terms of costings? Let's say people have got game reserves and they've got rhino. How's it going to affect them, private owners?
Well, yeah, the way we are moving at the moment, I've had some very good discussions with the likes of Rhisotope and Nexa, and the cost of the radioisotopes every time we talk is becoming cheaper and cheaper. So we were talking about sort of 20,000 Rand per animal for the isotopes, but I think we can probably get it closer to, say, 5,000 Rand. So in the end, because we would do this once every 5 years, you're looking at a cost of, obviously there's a cost of capture and darting, but that would be for the the owners of the animals. But the cost of the isotopes is going to come down to maybe 1,000-2,000 rand a year over a 5-year period. So, you know, you're going to be able to easily recoup that sort of cost from reductions in sort of insurance and things like that. We've discussed this issue with insurance companies, and they are saying if we can demonstrate that this technique works, then they'll certainly be looking at reductions in insurance costs.
I was looking at what ambassador, the Russian ambassador to South Africa said, Ilya Rogashev, at the launch of the ceremony at the Buffalo Kloof Nature Reserve. He said that they are pleased this project will add to a list of other successful initiatives. So it looks like obviously they're looking to expand this not only in South Africa, but throughout the continent.
Absolutely. We've been discussing, obviously, that our main focus at the moment is rhino. But there's no reason to suggest that we might not be able to use it on something like elephant as well. And then talking again to the Russian colleagues, they have some situations I was completely unaware about. But in Russia, where they have deer and things like that, which would seem to be poached illegally. And if we can find a way of putting some isotopes into the horns, into antlers and things like that, we would be very happy to work with those guys to, you know, it'd be an interesting, exciting project to do.
Awesome stuff. Professor, just before we let you go, obviously I know scaling of the project is obviously planned for endangered species around the world as well. For people who are interested, any link that you have that you can share with where they can find more information about this, just to educate themselves and maybe get involved in, you know, for example, an environmental organization or training, something of that sort, you know?
Absolutely. Well, we have a web page, and I have to remember what it is: http://rhisotope.org. There is no www in front of it. And then there's obviously the obligatory Facebook page, which is the Rhisotope Project. And then colleagues are running, I think there's a Twitter page called @Rhisotope. You have to understand, I'm the old geriatric old one who doesn't, you know, battles to understand some of these technologies. But you know, those are where we are at the moment, and perhaps the Facebook page will be a good start, and that will then take you to the web page.
Well, we are live on Facebook now, and on YouTube, and on Instagram, and Twitter, and around the globe. So yes, I'm going to share it with the viewers and the listeners as well.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Professor James Larkin, we
thank you for your time, your listeners' time. Thank you very much indeed.
Have a wonderful evening. Keep safe.
Thank you very much. Yeah, bye-bye.
Very interesting interview there, I must say, with Professor James about this new initiative using nuclear technology to protect the rhinos and the rhino horn trade. We're going for a quick ad break. We'll be back after this.